Hello and welcome to another light reading podcast, the Notebook Dump Edition. And this is your work week ending Friday, February 3rd. So congratulations for making it through another week. Joining me today is, I'll go quickly, Nicole Ferraro, Jeff Baumgartner, Kelsey Zeiser, and Mike Dano. And first, to talk about what's in their notebook, let's go to Kelsey.
Oh boy, what do I win?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. A new car?
Oh, sure. Yeah, why not? It'll be a very tiny Matchbox car. It's on a journalism
like a smart car.
What have you been up to this week?
Yeah, so of course it's earnings season, and Juniper announced their Q4 earnings. They're doing pretty well. They brought in $1.45 billion in revenue, and they said that they had record performance for their enterprise business, and their cloud business was the second highest revenue quarter for cloud. So good job on that.
So does that mean they're kind of making more inroads into being less of a hardware company, or is it kind of neck and neck right now?
Yeah, you get 10 points for that one, because they did talk about being more software-centric. Did you read the transcript, Phil? Yeah, they sure are getting more software focused. They are struggling a little bit still on the service provider customer side. That went down 8% year over year. And they're also still working through a backlog of $2 billion in orders, which is about $200 million more year over year than they typically have. So there's still some issues, which a lot of companies are facing with the supply chain and trying to get those orders out. But overall, they seem to be doing pretty well. They were also positive about 400 gig deployments. That came up a few times on the call as well. And analysts seem overall pretty positive about how they're doing.
Yeah, there's a great sort of movement to get more 400 gig in data centers. It's becoming the kind of de facto connectivity thing. And then, of course, those data centers are expanding ever so much because we're still using so much data. But in the enterprise sense, it's interesting because they have a shorter sales cycle on the enterprise side than they do on the service provider side. And a lot of the service provider spending has pulled back because I think for Juniper especially, service providers were kind of more of a channel for them in a lot of ways, even though they do sell like core telecom infrastructure. I guess they're just not selling as much of that as quickly as they had in the previous quarters. Mm-hmm. But the stuff that's making its way through the enterprise, like their managed Wi-Fi and their security services and that sort of thing. I guess the one thing about the backlog must be that if the software as a service stuff is tied to a new hardware purchase, then that delays two types of revenue. But if it's sold independently of one another, then on the software stuff will get recognized first. So anyway,
yeah, that's a good point.
It's something that we'll see again in all the smaller kind of networking companies. That'll kind of be a recurring theme. Probably the only one big enough to, I don't know, even out those lumpy sort of economic things is going to be maybe Cisco or somebody that big.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it makes you think, maybe the software side too, to balance out some of those supply chain issues if they can focus more on software and that's not as reliant on shipping and things like that.
All right. Thank you, Kelsey. Let's go over to Jeff Baumgartner. Jeff, what have you been storing up in your notebook this week?
A couple things on kind of the cable and the video side. I guess there's been a little bit of activity this week. I thought on the cable end, what was kind of interesting was Del Oro came out with their new 5-year forecast on cable spending, and they expect to see it rise as operators focus on distributed access architecture, virtualization, DOCSIS 4.0 upgrades, and so forth. Then the spending is going to start to get around the peaks that they saw around 2017 when DOCSIS 3.1 was really going. And so I guess that's good news if to hear if you're a supplier that kind of grappled with the slowdown during the earlier phases of the pandemic when operators were mothballed, or they mothballed some of the upgrade activity with like DAA and kind of put that aside to deal with the usage surge that we saw in the when people were working and schooling from home all of a sudden. And then we're seeing some of that reflected already with some of the suppliers, kind of this uptick. Like Casa came out and pre-announced their Q4 earnings. They saw an overall bump of like 25%. It included a rise in the cable related sales that were down a little bit during the supply chain problems and all that. But so some of that's loosening. They're also seeing some more demand on the cable side. And then the last thing on there is working on a piece on Telesta, this company out in Europe. They're going to be boosting their investment in North America to take advantage of the trend with all the upgrade activity here. But they're going to amp things up in the region to take advantage of the upgrade cycle. So they've seen that versus what's going on in Europe, with a much smaller cable market, and a lot of the guys in Europe are doing fiber to the prem upgrades and overlays and so forth. And then the final thing on the video side, one thing of interest was that the free ride over at Peacock is over, at least for the new signups, since they're going to focus on the paid premium, ad-supported, and ad-free tiers, and that kind of aligns with the plans over at Disney Plus and Paramount Plus and Netflix and Hulu. So there's some confusion about that because I think there's some analysts out there that view this free thing as kind of a way to provide an upgrade vehicle. So they're kind of getting rid of that. So that's a little causing them to scratch some heads a little bit. So that's the video and cable stuff. I don't know if we want to talk about Netflix on the password sharing crackdown, but apparently people are flipping out about some of the details coming out about that. So that's pretty expected though.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was more in our work Teams account. A lot of griping back and forth about whether or not we would drop Netflix if they tell us we can't share our passwords or what have you. So with cable, the broader story is that still all the growth from cable is coming from home and business broadband. Even though streaming is at an all-time high and everybody's streaming, they're not making any money or making any inroads into going back into consumer pay TV or anything.
Yeah, I would say that pay TV in general is still on that decline. The movement is toward, like what Charter and Comcast are doing with the streaming joint venture and trying to do a platform that it's kind of like what Roku's doing and Google and everybody, and trying to make, take advantage of the streaming ecosystem with subscriptions and ads and so forth. So going with more of a platform approach. But I think traditional pay TV, we're still kind of like, where's the floor on this thing? It just keeps going down.
Yeah. It's the Peacock story is only interesting in that I think a company like that, it's really hard to say how a business model change like that will affect them, because they're still so aggressively licensing content to all the other streaming platforms. So it's like whatever they might lose in the short term in terms of new subscribers to their exclusive service, they're still getting money for their content, that they have under ownership from just about everybody.
Yeah.
That's one of the kind of stranger, side stories about this whole streaming wars thing, is that these guys are all making money from one another while competing and saying that they're the best platform and so on and so forth.
Well, they like to refer to these little direct-to-consumer things as like the lifeboats that are out there to kind of protect everybody as the pay TV ship keeps taking on water. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I don't know about the Netflix thing on the long term. They did send a note to subscribers this week that talked about all of the technical upgrades they've made to the service, to improve the picture quality and stuff like that. So I think they're trying to do a little bit of, hey, we're giving you more and we're not charging you for it kind of marketing in the interim. And then maybe they're going to follow that with also stop letting your mother use our account.
It's your traditional carrot and stick. Yeah.
Carrot and stick. Yeah. So I see you, Netflix.
I see what you're trying to
But
do.
how are they gonna I know they address. I haven't read the policy, but did anybody read how they're going to manage, like, if you're traveling and you're trying to access Netflix at your hotel or in an airport or whatever?
Yeah, I think that they're going to have to verify.
Have to download all of Netflix and take it with you.
Yeah, just put it on your thumb drive. Yeah, you can download, or I think the big thing is they're going to start trying to verify when a device is used to log onto the service if it's not connected to your primary user's home network. Is kind of the new thing, just an additional verification that we do see on some other services anyway. But that's one way they're going to.
That's interesting because, like,
police it a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like you'd have to plan ahead and be sure that you're, like, occasionally watching things on your laptop or something.
Yeah.
It's going to be like, the bank cards that are so quick to turn on fraud protection these days. It's like you're going to have to call them ahead of time and tell them, hello, Netflix. Yeah, I'm going to go see my grandmother. So,
that's right. I'm traveling this week, just so you know, Netflix. Yeah.
It just sounds like such a bad idea. Anyway, Nicole covers the government sometimes, so she knows bad ideas when she hears one.
Sure.
Well, what was in your notebook this week?
Well, speaking of the government, I was just on my favorite website, senate.gov/committees/hearings_meetings.htm. And unfortunately, poor Gigi Sohn still doesn't have another nomination hearing on the calendar. It was supposed to be today, her third one, which Blair Levin very funnily pointed out in his New Street Research note on it, that it was the Democrats having a sense of humor, since today is Groundhog's Day. Groundhog or groundhogs possessive? Is it the groundhog?
I think it's just one that none
of the other groundhogs
rely on.
Acknowledge it. It's just
there's only one
By
left
the way,
in North America.
Yeah.
Just one.
Well, I was going to say, did Punks of Texas Phil over here see a shadow today or not?
Always see a shadow.
Anyway, so all right, so that's the story on Gigi Sohn. She might be getting a third hearing. This is dragging on for so long. All I really have to add to this at this point is I really look forward to the day when she can tell her side of the story of these past, 14 to however many long months this carries on, because it's an absurd process they've put her through. But my other sad story of the week was the continued saga of Starry, with the latest being that it's pulling out of Columbus, Ohio, which I think it had announced entering in June 2021. So that's just sort of one of many steps that Starry's taken recently to deal with its financial problems. It had a couple rounds of layoffs recently that Jeff has reported on. And of course, it pulled out of RDOF. So I kind of wanted to get a sense from you guys, especially Jeff and Mike, since you cover Starry as well. Like, what went wrong here? Was it just a case of them being overly ambitious with their plans, bad advisors? Like, what is the issue?
Probably trying to go to Ohio.
That's your first mistake.
That was their first mistake, right? Yeah. Okay.
To Ohio. They moved from Ohio. I just alienated some of our listeners.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think you're allowed, like, as a North Carolinian, you can make fun of Ohio. I can't make fun of anyone here in New York. But beyond that misstep of going to Ohio, what do you guys think went wrong with Starry so far? And is there hope?
Well, I mean, I think I think they did get a little ahead of their skis, in terms of expansion. And I think it's been very, once it became more difficult to raise more funds because they were getting extremely diluted, and so there was a big business reason as to why it was getting more difficult for them to raise more funding. So yeah, they definitely have had to rein it in. But yeah, with getting out of Columbus, it's like, okay, they're going to dial it back a little bit more. And I think they're just trying to figure out, hey, what kind of scale can this business support with the subscribers and capital we have. So yeah, really grand ambitions, but I think reality has caused them to contract and say, okay, let's try to make a go at this, at a smaller scale, and then maybe down the line there could be some opportunities. But I think on the good side for them, it feels like the business model in general is okay. At least in some of the, when they were kind of showing some of the cohorts and so forth with some of the markets like Boston and can't remember the other ones, but I mean, that part worked out. But yeah, I just think they just got a little overly ambitious, and so they're feeling that. I don't know if Mike, you agree, but that's kind of my 20-second, 30-second view of it.
Starry has been a really interesting ride. I mean, they started with really big ambitions. At one point, they were going to do 20 or 25 different cities. And what's weird about Starry is that they designed all their own equipment. They designed the receivers, the stuff that goes in people's houses, as well as the transmitters. They are using millimeter wave spectrum, which does not propagate very far. They're doing urban areas instead of rural areas. They basically took the early Verizon fixed wireless model, which was, urban areas, millimeter wave spectrum, but tried to build a business only around that. Verizon, they've got smartphone customers to supplement all their revenues. And then fixed wireless was a side business for them, but Starry was trying to make it into the main business. And, it just, I don't think that works, especially that they are designing all their own equipment. Like, that's a really expensive proposition. And yeah, I mean, they had technology that works, but it really just does not scale. And they needed so much money to reach any of their targets to get any scale at all that I'm just wondering who's going to buy their assets and whether they're going to do it in bankruptcy, which I would assume they will.
Sad. And kind of crazy when you realize that Starry and Starlink were like among the biggest winners in RDOF. And it'll be interesting to see how that impacts how the government hands out grants going forward, whether there's going to be more scrutiny on startups that are fixed wireless, or, certainly satellite, I don't think has a chance of getting much government funding anymore. But
what's really weird about Starry, I think, is that their business model, their whole thing was targeting urban areas. And then they bid for RDOF, which is in rural areas. So what expertise were they going to leverage, with literally a completely different market? I didn't understand that at all.
The CEO of Starry, in a 2016 interview with Light Reading, Chet Kanojia, I believe, he corrected the interviewer in the middle of a statement. She said, "So you've said you'd like for this service to be nationwide," and he interrupted her and said, "Global."
That's right. Yeah.
So the ambition has been there since the very beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And they literally bought spectrum covering 40 million people. So, I mean, come on.
It's wild. And these are the Aereo folks as well, right?
Yeah.
My favorite service, my favorite dead service.
Did you have Aereo back in the day? You did?
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I was, because I was an early cord cutter and I was trying to watch the Tony Awards. We talked about this on another episode of this podcast. I won't drag everyone through it, but I loved Aereo, and I was very upset when it was gone, and I haven't found any way to replace it in my like I said, now I have to go to my friend's house to watch the Tony Awards, and I don't like to go out at night. I'm tired.
Tony Awards is not for sharing. People need to watch in their own blanket forts in their own homes.
Exactly. Yes, in bed.
Let's see. Let's go back to Mike. We've talked about Starry's overreach and their mislaid ambitions, I guess, or maybe just not targeting a market specifically enough. They were kind of throwing darts there at the end. Mike, what kind of crazy things have come this week? I know you've been covering carrier earnings and all the big names.
Yeah, everybody's done with earnings. I think so. This week I got a couple of data points that I think are interesting, revolving around small cells. And as you guys well know, the whole small cell thing is really interesting. Small cells. So there's big cell towers; those are one thing. Small cells are the little things that they put on top of streetlights or rooftops. And every year they talk about it being the year of small cells, and every year it does not actually happen. And so the latest thing is that they were talking about small cells a lot, but then all the carriers got their mid-band spectrum. And so for the past year or two, they've really been focusing on building out that mid-band spectrum with big cell towers. And so they essentially have completely ignored small cells for the last couple of years. But now people are talking about small cells again because those big mid-band build-outs are almost done. They'll be done by the end of this year. And so the theory is that people like Verizon and T-Mobile are going to start looking at small cells again, starting at the end of this year, in order to fill in coverage gaps and densify their networks. And so the specific data points, like Verizon is testing wireless backhaul capabilities for small cells. Crown Castle is a tower company. They're doubling their small cell build out this year. And then the Wells Fargo guys, they talked to another small cell provider called Extenet, who is saying the same kind of things. It's like, once 2024 rolls around, we're going to start to see an increase. And also, Charter and Comcast are going to start building their wireless networks in CBRS spectrum. They might use small cells. But my take is that we've been here before. Like we've heard interest in small cells before. It hasn't really panned out in the way that people have kind of expected. And so I think this is another thing where it's like we have to remain skeptical about all the noise around small cells. That's my take out of that.
Yeah, especially because a lot of the applications that initially were being sort of attributed to small cells, like networking, assets inside of smart cities and stuff like that, can just as easily be done with connected devices and mid-band spectrum. Like, these things are not generating tons and tons of back and forth bandwidth. The small cell idea was basically maybe a technology in search of a problem in a lot of cases, because
it's kind of like they're waiting for a lot of traffic to be generated on the network from, cars and remote surgery and whatever else they're supposed to connect. All that extra traffic. I mean, there is fixed wireless, like that's generating a lot of traffic on the network. So maybe that'll be a driver for small cell demand, but I'm skeptical.
Yeah. The other thing is the use of video, I think, has become more, people are a lot more skeptical of every single, city service having some kind of video upload associated with it, that sort of thing. And that was another kind of narrative that was driving a lot of small cell interest, is like, oh yeah, we have to do this so we can film everybody doing everything in the city and then upload it somewhere. And boy, just saying it out loud sounds insane. But there were actually a lot of committees, people got kind of far along and, in kind of planning this, but it's like, if you just did, smart IoT devices and connected them to either, satellites or mid-band spectrum, you're fine. That takes care of 90% of the kinds of data that you actually need to do things like improve, traffic flow and make pedestrians safer and listen for gunshots on street lamps and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
Okay, cool. Any other weird things that we heard about that we didn't quite fit into a story, or something that is sort of out there on the periphery? I'm not going to make eye contact with Kelsey when I say that, because she always has something.
Do you want an Oregon Trail update?
Oh yeah, we are all characters in Kelsey's continuing adventures on the Oregon Trail. So everyone in our newsroom and God knows who else, just we're all very what do you call it? We're always mending our broken bones and complaining about dysentery.
Yeah.
So that's
so this on this trip, a lot of people are getting cholera, unfortunately. On our last trip, Phil died first. He, for whatever reason, Phil, your character always like never makes it to Oregon. Prospector Phil, yeah. Like, you gotta stick around and mine some gold for us. Come on.
It doesn't take much. Yeah.
It's fun too, because like when you do die, I get to like choose from a couple different options for your gravestone.
Yeah, it's always impressive to get the you're just going through your day and then you get a text from Kelsey with a gravestone that tells you in detail how you died. This is great for the psyche. It's my ego's never been stronger.
Mike's last one was "Dance on, Mike. Died as he lived with music."
With mainly Guns N' Roses.
Or Metallica.
Yeah, but they're referring.
You're cruising down the Snake River, and Mike was like, "Off to Never Never Land," and then he just fell out of the wagon.
I wanted to go to Paradise City, but that's fine.
Never made it.
Fell out of his canoe and passed away.
Rest in peace.
And we couldn't go to his funeral because we all had cholera. Too bad.
I do not want you having dysentery in my funeral, Phil. Thank you.
I wouldn't be around for anybody's funeral. Don't worry about it. So this is our tip. So our weekly tip now is to go download yourself some Oregon Trail and put all your friends in there as characters. And then it gives you a chance to continue to talk to them through the week, even if all you're doing is telling them, "So sorry, we ran out of penicillin." Anyway, okay, let's wrap it up here. Kelsey Zeiser, Nicole Ferraro, Mike Dano, and Jeff Baumgartner, thank you very much. Thank you at home or on your treadmill for listening and for watching. And have a great weekend. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.